Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is Deep and Effective Big Book Study and I am a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if this is your first time joining us, man, we really appreciate you being here today. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I've got some notes. And so let's just kind of share what we're here to do and what we're going to talk about. One of the first things that I'm going to start introducing from here on out is start opening this episode, this talk that we're going to have with a prayer. And we're always going to go to the set-aside of prayer. And if you're not familiar with the set-aside prayer, you can go online and look it up. There's many variations of the set-aside prayer. And I've found one that I find fits me and my needs and how what I need to talk to God about. So let's open this up with a prayer and invite God into it. So, and then maybe even talk about this prayer a little bit because it's a very valid prayer for what we want to do with this channel. So let's take a moment of silence here. I'm going to invite God into this and allow him to allow me to be a channel for his voice. So here's the prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience of all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Amen. So, we officially opened this up the proper way. Let's look over some notes here. So, if you're new to the channel, and of course you are because it's only the second episode, everybody's new to the channel. We came up with the name Deep and Effective Big Book Study. Well, where am I getting this? Where's this deep and effective coming from? Well, if we go to page 25 in our trusty old big book here, I'm going to read a little something and show you what I'm talking about. So in the middle of the page on 25, I read, it says, "The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is that the absolute certainty is that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things which for us we could never do by ourselves." So, real quick guys, the whole point of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to do one thing and one thing only. And it's not about sobriety, it's not about not drinking, it's about recovery, right? It's about entering and building a relationship with the God of my understanding. Power greater than yourself, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. But that's the whole point of the process. That's what the book is here to do, is to teach me how to do that. So this is why we're going to call the channel Deep and Effective Big Book Study, because in order to have a deep and effective spiritual experience, I need to have a deep and effective understanding of my problem. And my problem is alcoholism. And then I need to have a deep and effective understanding of the very thing that's going to get me to the spiritual experience. You with me? Okay, so let's go over some notes here. We open with the set-aside prayer. Guys, I'm going to be dropping my email in here. It's recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. And I want to send out a message to anyone, men and women, who's looking for big book sponsorship, right? For women, I know many, many other ladies that are in the program and are very strong within the program. They're assets to the program. And guys, I can help you out if you're looking for big book sponsorship, and start building this network of the fellowship that you crave, right? So I'll be dropping that in and we'll talk about that some more, right? So one of the things that we got to understand is that, this book that they gave us, right, back in 1939, in the most simplest form and the way I can describe this book, it's nothing more than an instruction manual, right? Instruction manual to do what? Well, like I said, to have a deep and effective spiritual experience. This has but one purpose, and that's to get me hooked up to a power greater than myself. It's very simple stuff. And like any book, well, we would start at the very beginning, right? We just don't kind of randomly open a book and start reading and go, okay, I'll start here. It's like you wouldn't start with a recipe and just start in the middle of the recipe and start building from there and expect to get the results. So we want to start with the beginning of the book, right? And kind of work our way through there. And And I talked about it on the first episode that we're going to get into a little bit of history of this thing, right? Because it's important. Do we all know where this comes from and why we do the things we do, why we say the things we say? And, right, we don't want to be these mindless parrots in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous just repeating nonsense that we hear. We need to really understand where our voice is coming from. So, back in the original days of Alcoholics Anonymous, you came to this very first page of the big book, right? Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, we're all familiar with the circle and triangle, right? Everybody knows it's recovery, unity, service, right? But there's some history with this thing, right? Where does it come from? Why did we adopt it? Why don't we see it anymore? So I did a little history on it. And I believe, and I got some notes here. Let me check this out. So it was officially, the circle and triangle, right, was officially adopted in 1955 at the St. Louis International Conference, right? But of course they've been using it before that, but that's when they made it official in 1955. But they made a mistake. And again, I'm not the master of the history on the circle and triangle, but I can tell you this, is that what ended up happening is that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't really own any rights to it. So they allowed it to start being used for other avenues. Other companies, it started to end up on pillowcases and coffee mugs and all these other novelty items. And so it kind of became this little bit of a war, a little bit of a legal battle that went on. And eventually Alcoholics Anonymous Press, just gave it up and said to hell with it. We don't want it anymore. So that's why we don't see it. And another thing that our big books, up until the 3rd edition, and I can tell you the year, so all the way up into a 3rd edition that was printed before 1993, when you open the big book, you would see the circle and triangle, or it would be on the paper jacket that came with the book, we'd see the circle and triangle. Well, we don't see it anymore because of this reason. We lost, well, I don't think we ever had it, but we don't have the copyright to it. Therefore, Alcoholics, the Anonymous Press, can't use it within our literature. And there's another key thing about the circle and triangle that most people don't know. I didn't know myself. Is that, right? We see the recovery, unity, service, the circle and triangle, right? But it originally was different. And I don't know if it's going to come through with the camera here. But when we look deeper into the recovery, unity, service, we see 3 very important letters. We see H-O-W. We see honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So what they originally gave us, because they understood what the foundation principles of the program was, and this is all derived out of the 4 absolutes of the Oxford group, is that originally had the circle and triangle with H-O-W in it. They got rid of that, and then they eventually got rid of the circle and triangle. So why is the H-O-W so important? Well, it is the foundation of what the program is based on, right? Some very basic principles, right? And it's in this diagram right here. We have the H-O-W and the W-H-O, right? So when we go back to page 567 in our big book, in the spiritual experience, 567 and 568, we're going to see where they talk about willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness being the essentials to recovery, right? So what we understand is when we go through the book, we have all these building metaphors. And I believe I talked about this in the first episode, is that we have all these building metaphors. And if we take all these building metaphors and we start to put them together, we're going to have somewhat of a picture that looks like this. Because this is going to be the foundation that I build my relationship with God. And so they understood this very, very early on when they decided to put the H-O-W within the circle and triangle. All right? So now we got a little history and a little knowledge about the circle and triangle, right? And but what does it really represent, right? Because there's a lot of myths and misconception that surround the circle and triangle. Especially, a lot of people say it's called unity, recovery, service. And that's not true. We have to say it in the order that it's written. And it's recovery, unity, service. And when we look at the triangle, my friends, recovery is on the bottom. Not sobriety. Again, Alcoholics Anonymous ain't selling sobriety. We're selling recovery. Why is recovery on the bottom? Well, recovery is on the bottom because that is what's holding up the entire structure, the entire pyramid. Because recovery equals God. right? Sobriety doesn't equal recovery. Time doesn't equal recovery. Recovery equals recovery, right? And then it takes us into unity, right? What is the unity about? Well, one of the biggest misconceptions is the unity equals fellowship, and it doesn't. The unity that we're talking about, and we're going to read a little bit out of the 12 and 12, and we're going to read something also known as the Declaration of Unity, right? Anybody ever heard of this? It's on the back of every single pamphlet that AA puts out. I believe it's in the inner sleeve of every, or somewhere in every grapevine. But what is it when it talks about this Declaration of Unity, right? And we have to understand that the fellowship is not what unity is representing. The fellowship is the byproduct of what we unify under. So the unity that we're going to talk about, well, first of all, let's go to the big book. We're going to go to page 17, which is the very first chapter, or the very first page of There is a Solution. Okay? All right? So they told us this right out of the gate, chapter 2. We're going to start understanding what the unity is truly about. I'm going to get a little lubricated here, guys. So come with me on page 17, the big book. Chapter 2, There is a Solution, which is singular. That's for one solution. It's important. This is where we actually start to see the first and third tradition within the page of page 17, right? And I'm going to go down towards the bottom, and we have the sentence that says, the feeling of having shared in a common peril. You with me on that one? This is where we want to start. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that's in itself would have never held us together as we are joined now. So, right, the common problem, the common peril is just one thing. That's actually what brings us together, right? And what is our common problem? What is our common peril? Right? It's not alcohol. It's not chemically dependent. It's not substance abuse. It's not disorders. It's not addictive personalities. Whatever terminology exists, we have the common problem that we all share is alcoholism, my friends. So we have one part of the unity right there. Common problem. That's what we're unifying under. But that is not enough. Let's continue to read. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. So we need common problem, common solution. We have a way out which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. Now you may be saying to yourself, what the hell is this guy talking about here? Let's look a little deeper. So we need to understand that unity equals two parts. It takes two parts to make up the unity that we talk about in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's number one, the common problem, which is singleness of purpose. Common problem, singleness of purpose. Alcoholism, okay? And that will take us right into the second part, which is common solution or primary purpose, right? And then because alcoholism is what we suffer from. Now let's go to the back of the book. Actually, I'll just get my 12 and 12 out right here. Let's go look up the third tradition in the long form. You know, we kind of want to hide behind the third tradition when it comes to our membership and our fellowship. And they, well, you remember when you say you remember. Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. You can say you remember all day long. But let's just make sure we clarify a couple things here. Just because I say I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous number one, doesn't mean I'm an alcoholic. And number two, doesn't mean that I'm doing the program, right? You can say you're a member all day long and it doesn't really hold any water. But let's go to the third tradition in the long form and see if what we see here lends any depth and weight to this understanding of what the unity is about. So I'll read. Tradition 3, our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Oh my goodness. Just think of how many people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous today do not suffer from alcoholism. Actually, about 90% of the people in the rooms don't suffer from alcoholism. We're not unified. We don't have any unity. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover. Nor AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that the group has no other affiliation. Wow, there's a whole lot going on within that tradition. They use the word alcoholic. They use the word sobriety, right? Why are we here gathered, right? If we're doing anything else, we're here to talk about your day, we are not doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're here to bring your problems about your marriage and your legal problems and your financial problems and how your neighbor's pissing you off, that's not what we're here to do. If you're here because of any other reason other than alcoholism, you kind of really don't need to be here. We welcome. You're more than welcome. But do you really need to be here? I think it's a question that we've gotten so far away from asking. It's a fair and it's honest question. We need to be asking and doing exactly what they did early in the days. Why are you here? What brings you to the meeting today? See, actually, this is what the responsibility statement is about, my friends. See, if we do what the book asks us to do, if we do what the program says, we're supposed to be getting that new man that walks in the door, grabbing that new woman that walks in the door, and taking them back to the little private room in your local clubhouse, or taking them down the street to the coffee shop and sitting down and spending 45 minutes to an hour with them and getting to know them and asking them, what is your purpose here? Do you even need to be here? Right? People, I talk like this in meetings, people think I'm out of my mind, but the reality of it is just, this is what the big book tells us to do. We're supposed to be able to help qualify the new man or the new woman to even be here. This idea that, well, welcome, brother, you're one of us, you're in the right place. Well, that's absolute nonsense, because the chances are is you're not one of us. The chances are you aren't in the right place. But this is where we are failing miserably as a society as a whole. Let's get back to some unity, guys. So we're understanding that we have two parts for our unity: common problem, common solution. I'm going to look at this declaration of unity, right? And let's read it and let's see if they understand. It says, this we owe to AA's future: to place our common welfare first, to keep our fellowship united. And what are we uniting under? The common solution, common problem. Common solution is the 12 steps. And the 12 steps as they are laid out in this book. You know, I've said this before, and I'm probably going to say it 100 more times again, is that we're not interested in what the treatment center thinks alcoholism is or what they think the 12 steps are. We're not interested in what the court system thinks. We're not interested in what your therapist thinks. We're not interested in the old timer, the old Bob in the back, of 30-year Bob in the back of the room who sits around and spouts nonsense all day. We're not interested in any of that. Right? Because what we do when we allow all these outside influences to make it into the meeting, and we've got 20 people in a room talking about 20 different ways to do something, right? There's no unity in that, is there? What we have is every man, every woman for themselves. Everybody's just doing their own thing. Well, I heard so-and-so say that, and he has all this time, and then his sponsor has all this time, and he says to do this. Well, what happens is the problem that we encounter every day is that there is absolutely no unity, right? Everybody wants to talk about how to do the steps every other way but exactly what the big book says. And as a result of that, all we have to do is see what a dismal failure it is by looking at our success rates. They're in the toilet. Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole has become absolutely ineffective to the real alcoholic today in the meetings because the program is completely unrecognizable. So let's look at some more, right? And then we have the responsibility statement on the back of all the pamphlets and in grapevines. And you know, you can go to a lot of meetings and it's kind of read as a tradition and everybody chants along with it and I'm responsible and well, let's just read it and see what it really talks about. I'm responsible. Anyone, anywhere reaches out for the help. I want the hand of AAs to always be there, and for that I'm responsible. Well, I have to even know what the hand of AA is before I can be of help, right? This is just a huge thing, and to understand what it really means to be responsible. So when we want to talk about unity and talk about responsibility, I have a responsibility to keep the program unified. I have a responsibility to keep the program uncorrupted and unwatered down. This is what the responsibility statement is. My responsibility is to tell the newcomer the truth. Now let's talk about some service for a minute. If you got any questions about the unity, by all means drop me a comment, drop me an email, and we can talk about some stuff. Let's talk about service for a minute, right? Is that, you know, we have to understand that the 12th step stands on its own, right? We cannot substitute other things and call them the 12th step, because they're not. So if you made coffee at the local clubhouse before the meeting, that's not the 12th step. If you're a greeter in your home group, that's not the 12th step. If you're being a GSO or a GSR or GSR or treasurer or holding any service position, that's not the 12th step. The 12th step is very specific in what it means. It's about carrying the message to the newcomer. A lot of these things that we want to pass on as service work is simply nothing more than just being a responsible home group member, right? Wiping down tables, making sure literature gets passed out. When I start to understand that the group is my home, that's why it's called a home group for a reason, because I'm going to take care of it as if I would my own home, which means that it's not okay for you to come into my home and treat Alcoholics Anonymous like a flop house, because it's not. And again, that will go back to the responsibility statement, right? We need to understanding that the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, when they originally came into effect, this was sacred territory. This was sacred and hallowed ground to be on. This is where the life-saving force of God was going to be brought into the room to help the recovering alcoholics. And now we just treat the rooms like they're freaking Mardi Gras, and it's ridiculous. And we need to get away from that, is what we need to do, and get back to the basics and understand that the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous are a classroom to help each other save lives. That's what we're here to do. So let's not get confused with service and the 12th step. Now, are there service positions and all these things that go in to make a group successful? Absolutely. But I'm here to tell you, at the end of the day, the reality of it is all we really need is this book and 2 willing alcoholics. We have, there's a lot of things that go in to making a home group successful, if you will, right? We need service positions. There's, a group doesn't run itself. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and there's always people that are willing to step up and take care of that, and that's great. But we cannot substitute that as a 12-step work either, right? Just because you're the GSR of your home group doesn't mean that you stop carrying the message, right? Everything else becomes secondary. The 12th step is the number one priority. That's the true service that we're talking about. And again, chapter 7, Working with Others, goes into great detail about what this service is. Right? So we've established what recovery is. Recovery is God. It's that simple. There ain't no other way to talk about it. Recovery equals God. And that's what's going to hold the entire triangle, the whole pyramid up. Right? Unity. Unity is twofold. Common problem, common solution. Singleness of purpose, primary purpose. We are only interested in working the steps out of this book. If you have another way, fantastic. But don't bring it into the meeting. We have traditions, which we will get into, that prevent all of us, not just you, but me as well, from doing that. See, because we've chosen not to be accountable to the traditions. This is why Alcoholics Anonymous is in the toilet today. Right? It's because we've chosen not to be accountable, and we've allowed all these other outside influences come in and corrupt us and dilute our message to the point where it's completely unrecognizable. And then we want to get into service, guys. It is the 12th step. Everything else is secondary. Let me look at my notes. I feel like I'm a little distracted now. This is not going to be some polished, well-produced YouTube channel here. I'm going to stumble over my words. I'm going to misquote stuff. I'm probably going to speak out of turn a little bit. And there's another thing, real quick, guys. So within the last couple of years, ever since, meetings first started to go online and, the in-person thing got shut down for all the craziness in the world, Zoom has been an absolute blessing, godsend in my life. It has allowed me to become awake and aware to other perspectives and other people's teachings in ways that would have never, ever been possible for me. My sponsee list has tripled as a result of meeting people through online meetings and Zoom. I get to sponsor guys from all over the world now. It's the coolest freaking thing ever. So this, and again, Zoom, it's all a matter of perspective. It's been a complete asset for me and many of my inner circle. We've been able to view this all as a great asset. I only attach myself to no nonsense, straightforward big book studies. And I only surround myself with people who think just like me when it comes to recovery. All business, because this is life or death business, my friends. Let's see what else we got. I think I talked about in the first episode about that we need to be understanding that the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the meaning is a classroom, right? We need teachers and students and teachers. This is about a classroom, guys. And so therefore we need to start understanding, we need to have a lesson plan. And when I started to understand this and started to be retaught how to approach the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and how I actually carry the message about treating everything as a classroom. So guys, I really appreciate you sticking with the video here today. I don't want to make these things too long and too drawn out. I like to keep people's attention span. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, share it with some friends. We're going to have my email, which is recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. Feel free to send me a message about anything to do with recovery. If you know somebody needs a good sponsor, men or women, please reach out to me. I can get you hooked up with both. I can get you hooked up with real assets in this program.